In a bit, but Evan, a lot's happened. Jimmy G signs with the Raiders. Gibson re-signing feels like forever ago. Where are you at with day one, a couple hours into the Niners free agency spending hysteria?
I mean, so first and foremost, there was no one on earth that I think that was expecting the 49ers to sign Javon Hargrave. The biggest thing I think we were all thinking about when it comes to free agency was maybe defensive back. Most definitely was going to need to be, and still could be, defensive end, opposite of Nick Bosa. They had recently drafted Javon Kinlaw and spent a very, premium pick on him. And where some people thought he might be getting cut a couple times, he'd been given the label bust. The Niners had, for the most part, always kind of had his back and put their support into him. No more. Not anymore, guys. No. This is an incredible, maybe one of my favorite signings in so many different ways for the last few years. First and foremost, it comes from the Eagles. Love taking, not that they had it, they knew they were going to get rid of a lot of one-year contracts signings that they had, but love taking talent away from the Eagles. Two, fills a huge hole that we've had. Javon Kinlaw was supposed to plug that role after DeForest Buckner left. Listen, DeForest Buckner is still a little bit younger and probably a better overall defensive tackle, but Hargrave is a monster pass rusher, and I think when you look at the 49ers defensive line, the first thing I tweeted is I think they're going to break the record for sacks in an NFL season. Hargrave had more pressures, or maybe like two off, like as many pressures as our entire defensive line, or defensive tackles, not Nick Bosa, had all season last year. Like the production that we're plugging in at that position, on top of him now being able to play with Nick Bosa and play with Coach Chris Kasurik, who's just gets the most out of every one of his players. This is just a huge signing. Last year we signed Javarius Ward at corner to get a true number one corner, and I think this is like immensely bigger.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of it. Nick Bosa is quickly reaching one-on-one unblockable status, and to put somebody else who's that strong of a pass rusher next to him, there's only so many double teams that you can throw at people. With Kinlaw, I'm from South Carolina. I was rooting for him, but obviously in that Eagles championship game, although not that it really mattered ultimately once you had no quarterback to throw the ball at all. But in that Eagles championship game, they were running at Kinlaw like crazy. So I guess I am pretty surprised that they went and got Hargrave, but this seems to be kind of the building strategy of the 49ers. They're willing to really go spend on these guys. They went and spent on Christian McCaffrey. It's kind of the same thing the Rams do. They'll go and pay these huge big contracts to guys who they think are going to be consistent stars, and then they're going to trade the first-round picks because they don't see those as valuable, and stock up on comp picks, and so on and so on and so on. They value the later picks a ton.
Let's also remember, too, that, with the loss of Jimmy Garoppolo and now Mike McGlinchey, who is gone on a massive contract, that allows them to still – one of them negates. I think it's the Mike McGlinchey one is negated or whatever. But they're going to get a third-round compensatory draft pick for that. So now not only are they getting Hargrave, but they're going to get a third-rounder as well. And it's just like you just keep reloading.
Who's going to be the right tackle this year now?
Is
it in the draft?
I think it's going to be maybe in free agency. I think I don't think it'll be in the draft. Do
they have the money for Orlando Brown?
I think.
Are you going to steal Cale McGarry from us?
Maybe, yeah. Here's the thing: they no longer are paying Jimmy. They're no longer paying Mike McGlinchey. You're looking at Jimmy Ward, who had a pretty big cap hit, might not be coming back. They re-signed Kevin Givens. They re-signed Tayshaun Gibson. These are very cheap contracts. So they've got the money to do it right now. They've got 3 quarterbacks, and they're probably all making between Darnold, Purdy, and
they're probably
Lance.
making $5 million combined, maybe
right?
Because of the Lance contract, but like $10 million combined.
It's just in a like they've got the money to spend right now. I do think they're about to. They just adjusted the salary cap too. Like, it's a really good time to spend the money. They're going to have to re-sign Nick Bosa, and that contract's going to be bigger than my ego, but we're on their way. Free agency's not done for the 49ers, so I would expect at least a safety, maybe a corner. They've got to figure out a couple positions on the offensive line, and probably a running back because it's Kyle Shanahan.
Matt, when you look at the Jimmy Garoppolo to Vegas signing, Josh McDaniels and Jimmy G reunite in Vegas. Devontae Adams is still there, who I think quietly got overlooked. I mean, I was going through his numbers this past year, and like the PFF, I think he's the number 2 overall wide receiver from PFF for this past year. I think just because the Raiders weren't as good and because he had Derek Carr has had a down, he's basically gotten worse progressively over the last 3 years. He kind of took a hit for that, and Josh Jacobs, obviously being maybe the best running back in football last year, was a big part of that too. He just got kind of overshadowed in a ways, but he was still highly productive and a really good player. Josh Jacobs is obviously back. Where does this put the Raiders? Because I don't know what to do with Oakland, or I'm just going to say Oakland for the next 20 years. I don't know what to do with Vegas because the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. The Broncos are spending a bunch, like Evan alluded to, with Mike McGlinchey and company, and Sean Payton's putting a bunch of resources in the offensive and defensive line like he did in New Orleans. But, I mean, the Chargers aren't going anywhere. Herbert was just in the playoffs. Like, they're right there. I don't know what to do with the Raiders and where they're actually at and what Jimmy actually does for them. What do you think he does, and do you see this being an actual upgrade over Derek Carr and the Derek Carr you saw in McDaniel's scheme last year?
I thought Carr was pretty rough. I'm not too high on him, but I don't think people are wrong in thinking this is a pretty lateral move. Now, if it's what you want to do, okay, fine. If you like Garoppolo better than Carr, if you're Josh, fair enough, do your thing, and you probably save a little bit of money long term doing it. Derek Carr's contract was getting pretty ridiculous there towards the end, but what does this mean for them? Well, they're still in the AFC, unfortunately, and there's